This Lian Li build thing is starting to become a trend, I guess. Number 3. I'm gonna be starting 4 later. Welcome to Simple Rud and some more build tips. This time we got the 011 Dynamic Air Mini. Or the 011 Air Mini. Is it the Dynamic? Either way, it's part of the Dynamic series. We're going to call it what it is. So as you can see, I did a air focus on this build. And I gotta say, I really like it. Now I will be going through doing a Diablo Treasure Goblin theme on this. We'll see how crazy we get with the theme. I'm still trying to figure it out conceptually. You got golds and purples and goblins and that. So don't forget to subscribe so you can see that when it comes out. As for this video, I'm just going to be talking about what it was like to build in this. Now, there were a few things I did oddly, so that's kind of my fault. There's really only one main issue I had with the case, and we'll just get that out of the way at the start. So when you relocate the back, so I dropped it down one to have more room at the top and kind of even this out in the middle, which helped a lot with how big the air cooler is. Now on the back, on the motherboard plate in the case, there are your standoffs. And those standoffs were extremely difficult to get loose and move around. Like, they should never be that difficult. I was able to do it, but it took a lot longer than it should have. It should have been an easy, you know, swap and go. Those things do not need to be in there that tight. And I think what happened was either there's powder coat in the threads, so that gummed up the threads, which made it difficult, or they were pressed in there before it was powder coated and that all kind of formed. Outside of that, I didn't have a whole lot of issues with the case itself. Now you can see I did go with 6 140 fans. I guess technically 8, because the Noctua NHD15 has 2 140s on there as well. And this thing moves a lot of air. Once I get it in and dialed up, I should be able to turn those fans down quite a bit and keep it going. Now it's 5600X, so you can say the NHD15 is overkill for that, but you're going to be able to game on this for hours without it even thinking of getting warm, which is wonderful. And the 3070 down there is getting fresh air right from the fans, so that's wonderful too. Now I made the decision with this to go with cable extensions rather than a whole set of custom cables, and a big reason for doing something like that is just the cost, right? Custom cables get expensive quite quickly, and you can do this at a fraction. Now that brings you to is a huge mess of cables, right? Well, what are you gonna do? You know what, Lian Li's got you covered on that, because every single one of them, their cases I've built in, that hasn't been an issue. They have a huge cable tunnel right through the center in the back. In fact, large enough to fit not only the full-size cable coming off the ATX power supply, but the extras from the extensions, all the fans, all the RGBs. There's a lot of cables in this thing. And you know what? It stuffs it back there really well. In fact, let's take the back off. So looking straight at it, you wouldn't even notice that I have a huge mess of cables in there. But the nice thing with how the tunnel's set up is I've got a bundle of them velcroed to the back, you know, the stationary stuff, and then I've got bundles zip tied, and then it's all just tucked up in there quite easily. Still have plenty of room for the SSD to set on there. Down here though, yeah, you're not fitting a second SSD down there. It's just not gonna fit. But all of that room did make this build a whole lot easier. Now you do have pretty easy ways to run the fan cables too. So your fan cables come up from the front through the side here. You've got channels right up here for these 2 fans and down below for those 2 fans. You've got every possible hole to run all your cables through where they need to be, with extra room too. That made this build a whole lot nicer. In fact, the only thing difficult about it was kind of mounting the NHD15 in there after you got the fans on. So going with that big of an air tower and something this cramped, you do get into some finger jam situations, and it gets very difficult to, you know, hook up all your cables. Now I did the tower last because I wanted all the cables on the motherboard hooked up easily. And well, as you can see from the front, now this is not a small case, but it's still rather compact because you've got, you know, your split channels. So you got your power supply, which takes up a decent amount of room and crams everything in here a lot closer. So you really got to think that part through. Now this case would be lovely for an AIO, especially with all the fresh air you can pump in from the front, the back, bottom, every situation. You can just bring all the air into this you need. And for this build, I don't think it's gonna be bothered with heat at all. I do think on this case, the decision to not make the hard drive cage removable or movable might not have been the right decision. Now with the way it's set up, it's not like you had a whole lot of options, and you really don't need two power supplies in this case because you're not really going to cram two builds in here. I mean, I'm sure someone could figure it out, but it's not something you're going to just bolt in from how the case comes from you from the factory. However, having that cage in there in the way when you're running a lot of cables, it's kind of a pain, and especially in this situation where I'm not using those. Now, that would be completely different if I was putting a hard drive or two in there. Then it is entirely necessary and you figure out a way to work around it. But I don't know that everyone's going to be doing that. You know, it's a perk of this case, but for a lot of users might not be a necessity, especially with the NVMe. I have one NVMe and one 2.5, and that's enough for, you know, the customer's needs. They're going to have all of their gaming needs right there. But I know there are people out there who would probably cram a lot more SSDs. I've seen people with terabytes and terabytes of space. So when you get into the enthusiasts, it starts to make sense. As for this build, I don't know that there's a whole lot else to cover just because there's so much room in this case that it really is an easy build. I did this whole build in a matter of probably 2 hours, and a good half hour of that was just moving those standoffs. So really quite quick, and just the look of this, the feel of it, everything, I definitely recommend this case. Now with that, don't forget to subscribe. I will be going through and doing a theme with this and showing you how that turns out, and then I'll probably be starting with one of the 011 Dynamic Minis. I've got the Snow White and the Black Edition, and probably going to be cramming parts into one of them. With that, that's all for this video. Thank you.